Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Have I got to test the screen? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, test.
What are you doing? What are you doing now? At the moment. Have a talk? Yeah. Okay. I can hear that that's already broadcasting.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
For Katrin.
Yeah.
Just, do you have another lapel mic or?
We can do, or we can do a hand.
Katrin, what was your preference for microphone?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what? It's all like, it's a little bit like living in what's that Tom Hanks film where they live in the bubble? It was a bit like that because my kids were so young. I had my third when I was there. I left to have her, but and you know, Diageo gave me a full-time driver, so we lived in an expat outside, and had a full-time driver. We had a full-time living nanny that cost us like $400 a month. We had a pretty much full-time housekeeper. So actually, at that age, when you just so actually, it kind of it worked because you could kind of make it work. The logistical stuff was really easy and really cheap, and school was on site, and it was all there, and so all of the stuff that kind of gets you stressed when you're a young bizarrely got taken care of, so you could focus on work and then being with the kids, and then I didn't have to do any washing, I didn't have to do any cleaning, any cooking, none of that stuff. So bizarrely, it worked really well. Right. Yeah. So Diageo does a lot of the right stuff around it. So they do it well. They were starting a lot of that stuff and doing a lot of that stuff. And they do a lot of, they do heaps of stuff like water in Africa. And so they do a lot of CSR, because they're petrified that they're going to get punitive taxes. And so they go and we did a lot on drink drive stuff. And, we sponsor Formula One, and the whole message is don't drink and drive. So they do a lot of that stuff. So it makes you feel,
Testing 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, Guinness is in Africa. a heart surgery. She had heart surgery, so she had a 6-month sabbatical, and she went out and she had something on her heart that was one of those things that they found accidentally. It was one of those things that if it had gone, would have gone, and so she had to have full heart surgery, and they had to put a stent in and all that stuff. So she was out for 6 months. She's just been through a bit of a nasty process. Typical Amazon shit. Well, yeah, her job was going away, and then she was on.
Good morning, everyone. And welcome to our first Z Talk, or Z Talk, organised by our new Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Delighted to see you all here. Even more delighted that we have been able to squeeze ourselves into Alison's very busy diary. We're very lucky to have her here. Alison started her career in management consulting and investment banking. She then proceeded to have a very successful career across sales and general management at Diageo, working in 4 different countries, 5? Yeah. And relocating with her family each time. She then received a call from a wily headhunter who persuaded her that Amazon was the place where she should develop her career, and really made her mark at Amazon, not only by having one of the fastest promotions in Amazon history, but also by the very human way she managed both her customers, her colleagues, and the individuals within her team. And during her tenure at Amazon, she was responsible for launching the D&I initiative within Amazon UK. She has since been CEO at Immediate Media, and is now exploring how to continue what has been a very successful career so far. So please do give her a very warm welcome, and she will talk us through her career and how she managed to balance her career with very committed family ties.
Thank you, Catherine. And for those of you that might not have worked out, Catherine was that headhunter who called me to ask me to go to Amazon. So that is the connection there and where that came from. So thank you, and thank you all for coming here. What I thought I would do is just talk you through my career in a little bit more detail than Catherine did. And then I wanted to just kind of go a bit deeper on 2 or 3 situations within that career that are some of the more interesting moments, probably. And then open it up for a Q&A and discussion and dialogue with all of you, so it's not just me here talking. So walking through my career in kind of one breath, as it were, which is a bizarre way to talk through your career because it does sound completely bonkers when you look back and say it all now. At the time, it all seemed completely logical. But I'm an engineer by training, so I did an engineering degree at Cambridge. I then very, very quickly left engineering and got sucked into the world of management consultancy, and spent about an 8 or 9 year period after university doing management consultancy in London. I kind of then, for some, again, strange reason, moved over to M&A investment banking, doing deal flow with Credit Suisse First Boston. Then decided, and in the middle of that, I got engaged. My husband was doing an MBA at INSEAD while I was doing investment banking in London. So I have I never did an MBA myself, but I like to say I paid for one. And I've got all of the files in my study from the MBA, and I actually did the corporate finance and the consulting modules within that MBA. So I kind of did one by stealth. It's cheaper that way. Then decided that actually a career in investment banking wasn't probably where I was going to end up, and I decided that I wanted to get more hands-on and do more of the stuff myself. So I made the move into Diageo at that point, which again I was working. Those of you that don't know, Diageo was formed in 1998 with a merger between Guinness and Grand Met. I think Lizzie's uncle worked on some of the initial Grand Met stuff there, we've already determined. And I actually worked on that deal when I was in Credit Suisse First Boston. So LVMH, who are the big luxury conglomerate who've just bought Tiffany's this week, were a stakeholder in Guinness. And so we were advising LVMH from Credit Suisse First Boston on that deal. So I was heavily involved in that deal, and then a friend of mine was working at Grand Met, and when the deal went through, they said they're looking for strategists to come in and merge those companies together and do it. And so I basically went into Diageo then, spent a couple of years in head office in strategy as well, basically doing post-merger management with them there. And then we just got married. We were in that lovely little honeymoon kind of area, and we decided, the pair of us, my husband and I, that we wanted to go overseas. And now was the time. He was actually at McKinsey. And so we basically went in and said, we want to move overseas, and we quite like Sydney. And I was doing a little bit of, I was doing some work with the Australian team in this kind of strategy space at that time. Sean was doing most of his work in South Africa, so we were having this completely bizarre relationship where we were spending 2 weeks in Australia, he was in South Africa, then we'd meet back in London for 2 weeks, and it's just like, no, let's just move somewhere. So we basically sold our house, left London on a Friday, started work in Sydney on the Monday. And that was great. And again, I was getting closer and closer here to being more hands-on and more operational. So 4 years in Australia. During that time, I had my first, my son, who's just turned 18, which is a bit scary. And then I was pregnant with my daughter. And Diageo is quite proactive in moving you at that point. And they just started a scheme where they were trying to identify commercial women and pulling commercial women up through the organisation. So I was lucky enough to be identified in that and assigned a mentor at that time who was on the board of Diageo. And he was kind of saying, look, it's time to move. You've been 4 years in Australia. Bear in mind, I was pregnant at this point. And I said, I want to be a general manager. Diageo, it was the country manager is king. I want to be a country manager. And I don't really mind where I go. I'm about to go off on leave. I'll sit down here on the beach in Sydney for as long as you want. Just call me when you have a general manager role. I thought I'd go off on 6-9 months leave and be all happy. And 2 days later, they called me and basically offered me the Russia general manager role. And I don't know about you, but if you were to sit there in Sydney on the beach and think, where are all the countries I'd love to go and live next? I'm not sure many of you would have Russia at the top. I'll come back to that decision in a bit more detail in a minute, but we did go to Russia. We spent 4 years there, had an absolute blast. And then after that, I then moved again with Diageo to the US. And did beer for my sins for a couple of years. And so if you think Russia, vodka in Russia is hard, you try beer in the US. It's a lot harder, actually, than vodka in Russia. Spent 4 years in the US then, and at that point, I'd had my third child in the middle of all of that. We were ready to come home. I think my son was kind of 9 or 10, and we didn't want to kind of keep moving him, and so we said, no, let's go home. So we came back to the UK. I then took on a role in Diageo that was pan-European, managing the premium end. So I had the beautiful job of all of the 5-star restaurants, bars, clubs across Europe and managing those. Everyone says, why on earth would you leave that to go to Amazon? But when you realise that you're out at 3-4 o'clock in the morning twice a week in those bars and clubs, and that's part of the thing, that's why you leave, because it's actually really exhausting after a while. So I did leave there, and Katrin was key in my recruitment process and moved to Amazon. That was a massive move to me, but actually a brilliant move in terms of almost starting completely afresh. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But I spent 4 years there. I started in books. I was actually given a choice of several categories. And I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to go to Amazon, I may as well go to the start and learn how books work and go from there. So I ran books. I then, my boss at the time basically left 6 months later, so I then stepped up and ran the whole of the media category, so £2 billion in revenue. And as is the way with Amazon, you run your day job and then you have 4 or 5 side jobs. 4 or 5, 6 or 7, yeah. And I had quite a few really interesting side jobs, actually. One of them was setting up the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. One of them was running Amazon Student Prime program, running the Trade-In program, and then various other bits and bobs in my side job. After 4 years, I left there and I went to more of a smaller, just exited PE-backed media company, which had a lot of very deep special interest online and print media assets. And I just spent nearly 2 years there, and I've just left, and right now I'm not doing anything, which is quite a bizarre experience, I must say, when you're quite used to doing stuff, to suddenly, what do I do this morning is interesting. So that's kind of my career, all chronological and in order. I'm just going to go back and just tell you a little bit more about 3 specific experiences in there that are the most mad moments of what I did. The first is that move to Russia, which was very logical at the time. But if you can imagine the scenario, like I said, I've finished work, I'm on maternity leave, I hadn't even had my daughter yet. I've declared I want a general management role, and I've listed out all the lovely countries I think I want to go to. And I'm like, nice, small little country to start my general management career on. And then Andrew Morgan, who is the president of Europe, basically phoned me and said, you know, we think we've got a job for you. He goes, are you sitting down? I'm like, sure. And he kind of said, well, how do you fancy moving to Russia? And I don't know what you say when you get that. I can't really remember what I said, but I did at some point in that conversation say, you really want a woman to go and run an alcohol business in Russia. For those of you that don't know, Russia is the highest per capita alcohol consumption in the world. The adult alcohol consumption is 57 litres of alcohol a year. So just ponder 57 litres of alcohol a year. That's quite a lot of alcohol. The vast majority of it is spirits. It's not really a beer market. It is a hardcore vodka market, really. So anyway, I kind of said, look, I need to think about it. I haven't even, I'm like the size of a double-decker bus right now. I can't really do anything. And basically what Diageo said was, look, you need to make a call within the next few weeks, because if you don't do it, we need to talk to someone else. I'd never set foot in the country. I didn't know what I was doing. So basically, I had my baby. Pia was born. My mother came down from here, and my husband went to Russia. So he went for a week to Russia just to. I don't even know if he actually interviewed on my behalf, but maybe he did. But he went and he checked it all out. He looked at where we could live. He looked at all of that. Bear in mind, I'd had, a brand new baby and a under 2-year-old at this point. So it was quite a big decision. And basically, he came back and he kind of went, well, if this, and this, then it can work. And so what we actually did is we went with a list of this is what will make it work for us. And it was, we need our nanny from Australia to come for 6 months and live with us, because I cannot move to a country like Russia and start work not knowing who's looking out, not speaking a word of the language, not knowing who's looking after. There was, some stuff on what kind of support we needed in terms of housing. There was a load of stuff on, flights home and access and stuff. And they turned around and said, yep, fine, when can you start? And so we flew from Sydney 2 days before the World Cup final down there that year. For those of you who are rugby fans might remember, we had tickets. My husband has never forgiven quite that one. But we flew from Moscow, from Sydney in November to Moscow. Big temperature from the beach into snow. It was all quite mad, with a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old. And actually it had the time of our lives, I must say. It was probably the best decision I've ever made from both a personal and a professional point of view. There were 12 people in Diageo in Russia when I joined. It was the biggest geographic market in the world, covered 9 time zones. It wasn't only Russia, it was all the STAN countries, all the former CIS markets as well. There were 12 people running that market. And it was just when all of that brick economy stuff was starting to really take off. And I was sitting there, it was less than 20 million in sales. It had a checkered history of we're in, we're out, we're in, we're out, we don't know what we're doing. And it was just, okay, do recommend. And during the 4 years I was there, when I left that business 4 years later, I'd not only had another baby in the middle, which I went back down to Sydney to have, because also that was logical. I went back down to Sydney to have her and then went back. But the business was 250 people. We'd fired our distributor in Russia. We'd bought the remains of the Smirnoff Russian vodka brand that Diageo didn't own at that point. We'd basically got in-market production, in-market importation, full sales and marketing business, everything, a fully operating 250-person team. And that was, I'd done that basically from 12 to 250. Now, I was super lucky because I did basically a startup under the umbrella of Diageo, which is a big, corporate, which gives you all of the support and all of the back end that you need, but also is a big publicly listed company, and Russia is a highly risky market to be in. So for me, it was brilliant. On a personal side, it was also actually brilliant, bizarrely for a country that's got snow for 6 months of the year, because the cost of living there is so cheap. That basically we were able to have, my husband basically learnt Russian and did some Russian startup stuff and started to write a book that's never been finished. We had Diageo gave me a full-time driver because it was too dangerous for me to drive there. We lived just outside of Moscow in an expat site with a British school and all sporting facilities. My kids started to swim and were taught by an ex-Russian Olympic swimmer. I don't think he gave them any drugs at that point, but who knows? Maybe he did. They are still swimming now, so maybe there's something in that. I had a full-time nanny who was there. We had a full-time housekeeper. So when you've got really little kids and you're trying to juggle, actually, I had all of that stuff taken care of for literally $400 a month. And any of you who are paying any kind of childcare will know that that's just nothing. So it was a brilliant situation because I could focus on work, and then when I was at home, I could really focus on the kids because I didn't have to do all of the other stuff that comes. I never did any washing, I never did any cooking, I never drove myself anywhere. It was quite a bizarre kind of bubble of a life, but at that point in time when you've got 3 kids under 4, it's a nice bubble because it works really well. So I think that was an amazing experience. The lessons, if I look back on that, are ask for what you want. I sat there in Australia and said, I want a general management job. You've got to ask for what you want. If you don't ask, no one knows and no one's going to give you. The second thing is, even when I was offered it was, they've offered me this job. Now, how do I make it work? And again, I went back and said, this is how I make it work. This is what I need to do to make that work. Bearing in mind, at this point, there were probably 100 country managers in Diageo and maybe 3 women. The rest were all men. And Russia was a hardship post at that time. Russia and Nigeria were the 2 top of the where do you not move your family list at that point. But if you ask for the right support and you put that in place, then you can get it. And the other thing I would really say is I had no idea what I was doing there. I had to build a leadership team in Russia. Some hugely talented people in Russia, actually. And it was amazing just how much you have to lean into your team. You don't speak the language, you don't understand, you have to recruit and build a leadership team. And so it really taught me, probably for the first time in my career, that I can't do everything myself. Absolutely couldn't do hardly anything myself at that point. You have to really lead into your leadership team and really run that business as a cohesive team, which was super important. The other thing it taught me is you need an outlet, right? When you're running that business, it's a little bit like I'm there, everyone was looking to me as if I knew the answers to things. I didn't know the answer to hardly anything. But what I had within Diageo was I could form a network. And so I became very good phone buddies with the guy who was running China at the time. So we were going through a lot of the same things. Also with a couple of the general managers in Latin America and also some of the people back in London. So have that network around you where you can kind of step out of the day-to-day and go, holy crap, what's really happening? What decision do I make? Because really, in that environment in Russia, there is no wrong decision, unless you are doing something illegal, which often you are asked to do. There is no wrong decision. You just have to make a decision and keep moving and then be prepared to wind back quickly from that, if that was the case. And there were many cases where Russian government have a habit of changing the laws, particularly on importation of Scotch, and then making them retrospective, so they apply for the last 6 months, which is very hard to be compliant in that environment, but you find a way and you deal with it. So that's that situation. The other situation I think is worth dwelling on is when I joined Amazon. So I'd been 15 years at Diageo. I knew what I was doing at Diageo. I knew how the business worked. I had a I'd lived in 4 continents at this point. I had a very wide network. I knew how to get shit done, right? If I wanted something, I knew how to make it. I knew how they made decisions. I knew all of that. So I could operate really well in there. And I basically moved myself into Amazon where, we talk about a fish out of water. I remember very clearly joining And it was in November, which is a mad time to join Amazon because it's just before Black Friday. And I remember going in and kind of, I was running the books business, the biggest individual business at that time, and also probably still the only real profitable business in Amazon on the retail side. And there was this small team, it was about 20, 25 people at that point, and they hadn't had a leader for 8-9 months at that point, and they were kind of looking to me. And I'm like, so, and Amazon runs on KPIs, as I'm sure you all do, and there's this report that comes out every Monday, and it's this sheet, and oh my God, I looked at this sheet, and they were like, there's literally 1,000 KPIs on this sheet. And I'm like, what do I do? I have no idea. And then Black Friday's happening and all of this stuff's going on. And for about 4 or 5 weeks, I basically went in and I'm looking at these sheets. I'm like, I have no idea what this business is. I have no idea what the KPIs are. I really don't understand what I'm supposed to focus on. And I remember going home to my husband and going, I've probably made I think I said it to you at the time too. I've probably made the biggest mistake. I have no idea what I'm doing. And again, 1 or 2 people basically said to me at that point, they're like, oh, grow up, you know how to run businesses. Just remember, you're there because you know how to run businesses. So just go back to what you know. Don't be fazed by all this new. And actually, it was really interesting because what I did at that point was go right back to the way I've always run businesses, which is, what's the strategy? Surprisingly enough, Amazon doesn't spend a lot of time on strategy. So no one in the books team had a clue what the strategy was. They were just selling books. That was their strategy. So we really took some time and we started to look at what really is the strategy. How do we all get aligned behind a strategy? Because then we'll understand which of these thousands of KPIs actually matter or not. And the other thing I did, normally I would go and talk to customers. In the Amazon world, you don't really talk to customers. Instead, I went and talked to the book publishers. So I went and sat down with the CEOs of the top 10 book publishers. Boy, that was interesting. Book publishers at that point in time did not want to work with Amazon. They hated Amazon. They were really scared of what we were doing. They were scared that we were becoming such a big part of their business. Amazon was famously uncommunicative. So they don't tell you what they're doing. They just expect you to operate with them when you're a supplier. And these big book publishers were just really unhappy. And because of that, there was a lot of decisions they were making that weren't beneficial to Amazon. And so I went and I met these 10 and I came out of that and I'm like, holy crap, they hate working with us. There's got to be a different way to do this. And when you actually boiled it down, there were 3 or 4 really big pain points that they had. And that coupled with getting really clear on the strategy, suddenly you could put that together and you're like, it's really clear. While Amazon is a giant, big machine, what you can do is you can influence in certain of those cogs and really change them, and then the whole thing starts really working for you. And so that's what we did. We focused in on how do we really address a couple of these pain points that the suppliers have, and how do we really focus on the strategy side of this and turn that around. And actually, it's amazing how quick it turns when you get the clarity on what you're doing, and it did turn very quickly. Which was really positive. And then for my rewards, I got given even more businesses to run at Amazon as a result. So again, I think I was so far out of my depth when I went into Amazon. I'd never run a digital business. Never run a books business, never talked to a books publisher. I had no idea what I was doing. But basically, if you go back to kind of the fundamentals of what you've learned and how you do business and you apply them through, that's all what it comes down to at the end of the day. And actually providing that goal and strategy for the team was what they needed in order to know where to focus and look. The other one that is probably really relevant to talk about is starting the Amazon Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. Again, that was a rather interesting situation. So at this point, I was on the leadership team of Amazon UK, reporting directly to the UK CEO. I was the only woman on that leadership team at that point. And Amazon has a process, which is a brilliant process, actually, a people review process. And every 6 months, and it's bottom up, so every team in the business does it, and it cascades up and up and up to review the people to identify, where are our potential future superstars. And then it culminates every 6 months in a day in one of the meeting rooms of the senior team, reviewing big numbers of people, so reviewing these people. And it was the first time that they'd ever done a female cut on this. So they have a classic 9 block of, 2x2 that they kind of potential and performance. And they did a cut and just put the females on this sheet. And it was quite fascinating because A, there weren't that many at this point, and B, what then pursued, and I sat there, and it was one of my first or second meetings with this team that I'd just been promoted onto. And I started listening to everyone going, okay, so how do we make our female population, how do we develop them, really good intentions from the room. And it started going down a route of, well, we need to have them development plans. So let's audit their development plans and make sure that they're writing good development plans, and then, and they started down this track of basically auditing. And I sat there, and at one point, Chris, who was the UK MD, looked over at me and said, "Alison, you haven't said anything." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "I don't think that's the right thing to do." And he's like, and I'm like, "I don't need you or any bunch of you or senior versions of you to audit my development plan. I'm perfectly capable of auditing my own development plan. What I need you to do is to really understand what I believe, what are my blockers, or what do the female population believe are their blockers in the organisation, and then try and unlock that for them." And he kind of looked at me and went, "Yeah, okay," and turned back and carried on. And 2 days later, I had a meeting with him, and he's like, "I want you to do it." I'm like, "Do what?" "I want you to tell us how we empower females in this organisation. I want you to start the diversity and inclusion initiative and run it for us here at Amazon UK." And again, I'd never done that before. And it was, as I said, Amazon was very good on the side jobs, and that was quite a powerful one. So what I did there was, first of all, I went and found some passionate volunteers. Katrin was one of them. There were actually quite a few when you got into it, really senior women in the organisation who were super passionate, and actually, interestingly, a couple of really senior men in the organisation who were super passionate about this. And we basically got the data together, as you do in Amazon. Let's get the actual data underlying this to see what's happening, see the speed of promotion, see the ratings, whatever. And then we kind of said, what should we do? And honestly, there was a list of about 15, 20 things we could have done. And everyone was so kind of excited. But basically, there was no way if we'd gone down this 15, 20 things, we'd have ever got anything done. So we basically focused, we've really got to sort the absolute basics out here. And we basically went right back and said, there are 4 or 5 things we need to do. And that they're not rocket science, they were super basic. I'll give you one example. Amazon recruits a lot of MBA students. So they go onto campus in INSEAD and in LBS. And the year before we started this, they went onto campus with an entirely male team. 7 people from Amazon, entirely male team. They got 20% applicants of women. And INSEAD and London Business School have done a fabulous job, actually, of increasing the diversity pool that they source from. And they were close to being 50-50 men. Amazon got 20% women, 80% male. The next year we did it, and they went every 6 months, so this was quite a frequent one. We went in and we went with a 50-50 team. I led the presentation, and we had 50-50 team, and we got about 45% applicants. And that was a really good, very early, very simple proof point that actually, if you turn up and look diverse, and you want to hear and you do that, that's the response that you get. And it was amazing because the conversations that we could have then just flipped very, very quickly. So we did some really basic stuff. We did a lot of stuff on the interview processing and how we come through, and making sure that if you're interviewing through Amazon, and you have a lot of interviews in Amazon, that you're getting interviewed by a diverse range of people, both in terms of roles and gender. Also really looking at flexible working. Amazon had no flexible working policy at that point in time, so we put one of those in very quickly. Maternity policy was very restrictive at that point. That also came through very quickly then. We started off with some talks, getting some external people in, just to start that dialogue, understand what other people were doing. We were not talking publicly at this point at all, because we were very clear that we had nothing to say publicly, because we didn't have our own house in order. So we started getting people in, we started doing panels. We always made sure that the panels were balanced, male and female. We never had it so it was just kind of female panels. It was really, really important to us that this was an inclusion thing as well. And so we just went down that route, and we started it, and we started seeing differences in the metrics coming through. You started seeing differences in the recruitment metrics. You started seeing differences in the promotion metrics just by making it a focus and by looking at it through a different lens. And now, I don't know if you follow it now, but it's 5 years on, and I've been out for 2 years of Amazon. They're now winning awards, actually, for the program they're doing. They're now speaking publicly about what they've done and how they've done it. They're sponsoring engineering awards. They're putting in grants. And all of that has come from, if that's not happened quickly, that's been a 5-year journey. But it's that basics and starting. And basically, speaking up in that room and saying, I don't think this is the right thing to do. Let's try and really listen to what people want in the audience and work it to them. So I'm going to pause there and maybe take some questions, have some dialogue in the room about what you guys think and any other questions you've got. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you change or increase the thinking internally about this? I get a lot of the external stuff. How do you create attitudes internally to be much more aware of diversity issues?
We made it a regular topic at a lot of the management teams. So Amazon has the top management team, but also all the individual management teams. So we made the data available in those management teams, and Amazon's super data-driven. So the moment you see the data, and before all that data had been completely hidden, it was just not shared. So we made it very transparent at that level. We had just a group of super passionate supporters who were just working through. We started a mentoring program and a circles program. So we had about 350 very active people within the Amazon teams who were bringing up on their leadership teams, who were looking to put things in place, who were calling out behaviours. So it was really kind of from the bottom up, but also top down, exposing that data and then really celebrating those successes. It was focused on, at that point, gender diversity. That's the only thing the data's very hard to get on other stuff, actually. So it was focused on gender diversity. But it was in all elements of it. So it was recruitment. So we put in place dashboards through recruitment that showed, when someone came, how many people were interviewed by an all male group or mixed group, and why, how did we go, what were our points of recruitment. Amazon was recruiting at that point hundreds and hundreds of people a year, so seeing that change in recruitment metrics come through, and they can change quite quickly, actually. The promotion ones and other ones we put in place, they were slower to come through because that takes time, but it's amazing when you start to see that difference come through. But transparency of the data is the number one thing. If you're not being clear on the data, and flexible working, I'm sure you guys already do a lot of flexible working, I don't know. That's quite a big thing, and that's quite a big enabler. And again, we were lucky in Amazon that the senior team were very committed to it and actually would work from home several days a week, some of them. I have a long commute, so I was first to say I'll work from home, but several of that leadership team were working from home really regularly. And so when you're setting that example at that level down, it really starts to cascade through in a positive way. So it's small things moving. There's no kind of magic thing, unfortunately. think the transparency of the data was the biggest thing that changed it, because it had all been secret and it was never looked at. And then just, we had the internal circles groups going, which were just small groups of people who would just get together, and normally we'd try and put one senior person in to facilitate those, just listening to some of the barriers and some of the things coming up through. They did, after I left, but they did all the unconscious bias training and stuff. I don't think that had any impact whatsoever, to be completely honest. I think they did it. We fought that for a while, actually, because they did about 4 pilots on it and none of them worked. But the main thing is having your senior leadership team acting that way, calling the behaviours, working from home if you've got flexible, supporting, the inclusion in the team. That's the kind of main things that they look for. So there's 2 parts of it. There was one formal policy for people who wanted formally some kind of reduced hours, right? And that was formal. And then there was an informal, be a human, flexible working policy that we, that was up to you and your line manager to agree, that wasn't formal, no. And it was really important that there was that 2 differentiation points. But actually, because we had the network of people out there, when you found out quite quickly if there were some line managers who were like, no, you can't do flexible working. It didn't take long to find out some of that and then have a word in the right ears, and it starts to move. So, but that bit was completely informal. I don't think you can do it any other way, actually.
Can I give you the mic? Sorry. Just so everyone can hear and people on the YouTube link can hear too. Thank you.
Hi. I just wondered what, in your opinion, was one of the most difficult things about juggling your career and motherhood?
The hardest thing is that you constantly feel guilty, and you've just got to get over that and move on. But you always constantly feel that. And what I did was I set myself a set of rules which I would abide by. And I didn't always abide by them, but I really tried. So, they were really simple things like, get out of the office by 5. You would rarely see me in any office, I'm catching because it's beyond 5 o'clock, because getting out and going and being home was really clear to me. It didn't mean, as it never means, that you're not doing everything you need to do, but there were certain rules. I never travelled without my family. When I was at Diageo and I was moving, it was always, if you want me, we all come. It's not, I'm not going to, somebody actually suggested that I do the Russian role for 6 months while my kids stay in Australia, and then they come out when I'm settled, and I'm like, yeah, how does that work? No. But that was the norm, right? Because bizarrely, that was what a guy would do. And at that point, this is 15 years ago now, I think it is different now, but that is what was the norm. The guy would go to Nigeria and live and come home, 1 week in 6. And that was it. And I was like, no, if I'm going, everyone's going, and we're all going, and we're in it together, and this is the support I need. And I think if you're really clear in your own mind about what are the lines that you won't cross, I would never move without them. I did travel, but I was quite managed on my travel in terms of how I kept that in check. I always took, and I still do take, loads more holiday than probably I should. But for me, that was really important. When I joined Amazon, I negotiated one thing on the contract, more holiday. One thing. I didn't negotiate salary or anything. I just negotiated more holiday. But I didn't negotiate anything else, because for me it was always, if I had that bit of it, and but you do always feel it. And even today, right, my eldest is now 18, so I have an 18, 16 and 14-year-old. It's harder, I shouldn't tell anyone this, it's harder now than when they were babies, actually, because now they are super demanding, and it's often only you that can solve their problem, whereas when they're young, to be completely honest, one of a number of people can solve their problems, because their problems are are a lot simpler at that age. You know, when they're writing their personal statement to get into university, there's really only mum and dad that can help them with that. You can't outsource that bit of it. But stop beating yourself up. Work out where your rules are, and then find a way that you can work within those rules. And when you break them, be honest with yourself that you're breaking them, because you will break them, and then just find a way to get back in. The other thing I'd say is I'll be really honest. I've done nothing but work and family over the last 18 years. You know, I haven't managed to have much balance in myself and for me. Right now is the first time I've probably taken any time for me. Because when you're doing the job and you're doing the family, there isn't a lot of room. I never found room for anything else. So I must admit that I've probably suffered a little bit in that middle. But that's it. Now I'm going to get my time back. So it's going to be good. Yeah. No, it's not. It's completely right. No, I think that's probably true. And I think some of the initiatives that are coming out now, you know, some of the shared parental leave stuff that's happening, the move, all of that stuff is just fantastic. I mean, I was quite lucky in that my husband has always been in super flexible jobs. I think it's hard when you're both in a professional track to make it work. Sean's always been a bit more flexible and a bit more, you know, multiple eggs in the air for doing a lot of stuff. So that's been a bit easier to manage from that point of view.
So as Catherine mentioned, we are starting a D&I initiative.
Yep.
And as you said, there is a lot of issues that could be addressed. So how did you identify and prioritize the topics to focus on?
To me, I think it's more about the opportunities, right, rather than issues per se. So it's within each organisation, it's trying to identify what are those opportunities that will have the biggest impact. And so, like I said, we focused in on the ones that would have the biggest impact. For us, it was recruitment, because the scale of recruitment was so massive. It was flexible working, because that was a really big thing at the time in Amazon on you know, that culture of how do we do flexible working. We just moved from Slough to London at that point, so that was a really big deal. You listen to what the issues are in the organisation. You listen to where people are getting really stressed and finding roadblocks, and you try and focus on them. But really, it's about, don't take everything on, because you can't fix it all at once. And actually, if you get the right people supporting it, it's surprising how quick it cascades. So I would really say, you know, whatever matters to Zoopla right now, and whatever opportunities you see, focus on the one or two, and get them rolling, and then pick up more, rather than try to do everything at once.
Hi. Regarding diversity, it's good to hear that you had people willing and passionate to improve diversity. Did you have any detractors or people who opposed even the idea of improving diversity? And how did you deal with
Yeah,
with
I mean,
that?
I actually think we were quite lucky in the UK business, because Chris, who was the MD at the time, was 100% supportive. And, well, I was about to get there, So Chris was 100% supportive, and when Chris got behind it and made it important, that really helped. As Catherine said, Chris reported into Xavier, who ran Europe. He was way more sceptical of the whole thing, and he just was completely, this isn't going to make any, you know, difference. What's the issues? What's the concerns? And I think Chris just basically said to him, "We're going to do this. Leave me alone," and literally blocked him off for 12 months while we were doing it, or started it and moving it. And when you start to see things change, you start to see those recruitment metrics change. Those are the first things that changed. within 18 months, Xavier was asking us to roll that program out to Europe. And so, yeah, I mean, we were quite lucky in that the immediate bit was, we're going to do this, and it mattered to Chris, and hence we got behind it in the UK. And we started with just a portion of Amazon, just the retail bit of Amazon, and gradually it expanded, and we added on the other bits, and then we took it to Europe. It was super interesting putting flexible working into Europe, particularly in Germany. They just did not get it. They just didn't get it at all. They just could not understand why someone wouldn't want to come to the office all day, every day. But eventually, at this point, Xavier was convinced of the benefit and just told them to do it. And they did eventually put in the informal policy around flexible working. So I think you've got to get momentum. You've got to do some things that show a momentum and a change. And then it's amazing in a data-led company just how quick that goes. Because if the metrics are positive, suddenly everybody is promoting their metrics being positive. And then suddenly it's just like, oh, okay, everyone's now. It was amazing to me at the end just how many people were putting on their reviews and putting in their stuff that they were, part of this initiative and they were driving it. And so it becomes infectious when you've got some positive. So we were lucky, I think.
Hi. Were your own parents career-driven and successful?
That's a good question. So my mother was a farmer's daughter, and my father was a postman. And that's how they met. He was delivering post to the farm and she was hiding behind the... it was at a time when they used to put the churns, what are they called? The churns, is that the right word? I can't remember. At the bottom of the drive, and he used to deliver the post and she used to hide behind them to see him. So that's quite sweet. No, well, actually not no. So that's how they started. And my father did start his own business. So he stopped being a postman and he went into packaging, actually, and worked for a local, they lived down in South Wales, worked for a local packaging company. And I remember very clearly when I was about 10, he started his own business. And it was his own packaging business with a partner of his. And they used to make the pizza delivery boxes. That kind of corrugated packaging, and he worked every hour under the sun. He really did, and my mother basically did home-based stuff. So she used to make wedding cakes and curtains and clothes and all of that kind of stuff. And my dad always said that the one rule my mum had, talking about setting rules, was he had to be Sunday lunch in our house was the one time he used to go to work on a Sunday morning, but he had to be home by 2 o'clock for Sunday lunch. And he always said he would retire when he was 50. And I think he was about, I don't know, I was probably early 30s when he started his business. And he sold his business on his 50th birthday and had enough money from that for that, not huge amounts, but for them to live. And they have basically lived off that business since then. So no, but yes, in a kind of funny way. But yeah, so he did work very hard on his business, but on his 50th birthday sold it completely, and yeah, took up golf in a big way. Got right down to 3 before his hips went, and he had to have double hip replacement surgery.
Hi. Have you seen any sort of knock-on benefits by becoming more diverse as a business? Were there other things that you weren't expecting around performance and?
That's a good question, and I don't know explicitly how to measure that in terms of metrics. I think it's always interesting the direction you go in. The diversity is about a diverse thought. That's what you're trying to get, is you're trying to get different points of view and different thought processes in the room. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, I've been lucky because I travelled so much that I've always had quite a lot of different cultural norms, different thought processes in, that for me I find it really valuable and it really thrives and the ideas become much better. But I can't give you any metrics against it that prove performance is better. Although there are lots of studies out there that do definitely prove that performance is better, but I can't give you any directly, no.
Two parts to my question,
Okay.
both different. First one is there a title to your husband's unfinished book? Not yet.
No.
Okay. And the second one is, what's next for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. I'm hoping Catherine's going to help me. To be honest, I don't know. It's really interesting. I've made a decision just to stop at a moment and pause. And I think it comes back a little bit. It's bizarre that it's my 50th birthday next year. And I don't know whether in the back of my head my father had this, because he had this, when I'm 50, I'm going to, for whatever. And I don't know whether that's subconsciously, I haven't thought about it till I just said that. I don't know. I'm potentially thinking about looking at, non-exec stuff, potentially working with some startups. I don't know. I am completely wide open as to where I go, which is the first time in my career I've ever been like that, to be honest. Because he never finished his book, we don't have a royalty from the book, so I haven't been in a situation up till now when I've been able to actually stop and look at things a little bit. I don't know. It's quite exciting at this stage of your career to have an empty sheet ahead of you, because you can really think about what is it. My son will leave home this summer. My two girls won't be far behind. In kind of 4 years' time, it's just going to be Sean and I, and I'm like, holy crap, that's a bit scary again. So it is a good time just to stop and think about what do you want to do, and how do you want to live your life in that period. So I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, I'll make it quick. Could you give a little bit more information around the mentorship scheme that you mentioned, and the benefits and the shifts in behaviour that came off the back of that?
Yeah, so I personally benefited from a mentor scheme when I was at Diageo. As I said, they were deliberately at that point trying to bring through commercial women. They didn't have many commercial women when they started that. And I was lucky enough to get assigned one of the board members as my mentor. And I think, throughout I was 15 years at Diageo, I've probably got assigned Stuart 2 or 3 years in. I still talk to him now, not frequently, but I still talk to him now. And it's for me, it was when something's in front of you, you go into all of that. I think they call it imposter syndrome now. I don't think they ever called it that. But all of that, I can't possibly do that. How can I possibly do that job? How can I possibly? And having someone there who kind of knows you and has seen you, they start putting all of that why can't you do it? We've done things like that before. So it's just good to have someone kind of outside of the realm that knows you reasonably well, who can kind of call you to that stuff. So I found it super valuable. I've only ever had the one. I got really lucky with who I got. At Amazon, it was a big request from a lot of the women actually in the business that they wanted mentors, and they wanted to do that. We really struggled because in typical Amazon way, we were like, how do we scale a program? How do we automate matching and all of that? And actually we said, just let's not bother trying to fix that initially. Let's just try and give, women some mentors. And I personally mentored about 4 or 5, probably a few more than that, people in the business. It's just someone to talk to who's aware enough of what's going on, but not in your direct line, probably. And it's just to hold you a little bit honest to yourself, I think, and to hold you and to just kind of tell you can do it. So I found it really valuable. It's particularly around transitions, I think, that it becomes really valuable, or when you're dealing with something that's, you're hard. And typically the hard stuff is either around people. I'm really struggling working with X or working with Y, or I'm struggling with someone in my team, or I'm struggling with my boss. That's one real zone that it helps, and then transitioning from one thing to the next. But yeah, I mean, you have to get lucky with who you gel with. You have to be very honest, and as a mentee, I think you have to be prepared to open yourself up a little bit and be a bit vulnerable in that relationship to get the best out of it. But I mean, I think they're quite valuable, but they're hard programs for companies to do well, I think. I think it works better where the mentor and mentee just happen to kind of like their conversations, and so they become. I'm still mentoring 1 or 2 people from Amazon now, even though I'm no longer there, just because the relationship was strong.
Brilliant. Alison, thank you so much. Really grateful.
Thank you.
Can we give her a big round of applause?
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you know someone named Carol?